Hello, and welcome to Anime Audio Commentary. Today I'll be commenting on episode 1 of My Dress Up Darling. If you'd like to watch along, then start watching now. So, full disclosure, I don't really know much about Hina dolls or the artistry behind them. I'd imagine it's a fairly traditional art form. I mean, they seem pretty interesting, at least the way they're presented here. You know, not to take this to a totally cringe place, but as somebody who paints miniatures, you know, there's a lot of fine motor control that goes into this stuff. Wow, kids are real bastards sometimes. Like, I recognize that he is essentially painting dolls, but that's kind of an overreaction. It's not worth not being somebody's friend over something like that. Man, starting off pretty heavy already. You know, this show was sort of like the big flavor of the month a little while ago, but I never really got into it at the time. I'm wondering if that was all merited hype. So I guess not a whole lot has changed in Gojo's life. You know, Hina dolls are still something he cares deeply about, considering all the supplies littered around his room. It also seems like he's functionally an orphan. I mean, maybe my, cultural knowledge is a bit lacking, but considering he's praying at a shrine with pictures of presumably his parents, it would seem as though they are no longer in the picture. So I guess that explains why he still lives with his grandfather. Okay, so you know, I think we're getting a little bit of foreshadowing here. You know, his grandfather says his work on the clothes is good. Faces still need work, though, but that's the part that requires the most fine motor skill. You know, it's no mean feat to paint faces. So it seems like Gojo doesn't really have any friends either. You know, that bit with the girl in the beginning was, I guess Gojo starting as he meant to go on. Poor guy. Like, I'm not exactly blessed with friends, but, you know, I've got a few. You know, for something that was essentially, like, seasonal waifu bait, the animation's pretty smooth so far. In a pleasantly surprising kind of way. Man, Gojo's got it rough, like, just nobody wants anything to do with him. Poor guy. You know, that mistaken identity bit, that's particularly painful. Like when somebody waves at you and you wave back, but they weren't actually waving at you. Man, I hate that. Okay, so you know what? It seems like it's not entirely one-sided. Gojo is at least somewhat aware that he's kind of a weird dude. And a little self-awareness isn't bad. You know what? He seems to at least be taking a realistic approach here. You know, if everyone's just gonna pick on him anyways, you might as well not bother. Oh. Man, talk about an inciting incident. That's like hitting the back of the head on a desk. That's like instant death. It's a good way to die. Of course, this begs the question, what the hell happened to launch her across the room like that? Oh, you really can't talk to other people very well. It seems like they're both kind of weird in their own way. You know, personally, I wouldn't go around, like, touching other people's arms without asking. It's kind of weird. At least she seems to have a sense of humor about it. You know, she's pretty nonchalant and lucid for having just smacked her head on a desk. So I guess here we have a little bit of a setup for the main conflict here. You know, there's a nerdy dude and a popular girl, and for reasons currently unknown, they will quickly become very good friends. Okay, so the plot thickens a little bit. You know, Marin likes at least some anime, and she doesn't like people picking on her for it. Alright, there we go. You know, Marin sort of spills it right out. Making fun of people for what they like is verboten. So automatically, things are looking up for Gojo. At the very least, you won't pick on him for wanting to paint Hina dolls. Gojo's sort of waxing about how nice it must be to be accepted for who you are. But I think the big takeaway that he's sort of missing from all of this is that Marin is, from what little we've seen so far, sincere in who she is. And sincerity, if nothing else, is something to be admired. So that sort of leads to her being accepted. Of course, being an attractive girl doesn't hurt either, but I think that's kind of secondary. Man, this is kind of unusual compared to a lot of seasonal stuff I've watched where Gojo seems very self-aware about his predicament. That's kind of unusual. I don't recall anything else doing the same sort of thing. So, as awkward as Gojo said he would make the conversation, he seems to be doing a fairly good job now. Granted, it is about something inconsequential. It's interesting how this conflict is already creeping up about Gojo being passive about dealing with people, and Marin just sort of, telling him off and telling him to grow a spine and not accept things at face value. Normally that's not something that happens right away. Oh wow. It's a lot of blood on those scissors. Do you snip off a bit of skin? Jeez, dude. So I guess it's pretty understandable that Gojo's been fixating on his conversation with Marin. Obviously it means a lot to him, considering how she basically saw the root cause of his problem and tried to address it. Alright, so the plot continues to thicken. I guess there's a sewing practice room, and it must be secluded enough for Gojo to feel comfortable using it. Oh dear, the plot thickens again. I don't know if Marin had the same idea, trying to find this abandoned sewing room. Oh dear, Gojo. You've gone and done it. You talked to the doll in front of someone. I'm afraid you've just committed social suicide, dude. Alright, well, there we go. Good on Marin. She only noticed what was important to her, the fact that he can indeed sew. Now, in extreme diversion to, whoever that girl was in the intro and presumably everyone else, Marin's taking a keen interest in the Hina dolls. She rightly recognizes that it's an object of beauty and seems to be genuinely interested in it. Yeah, good on her. There we go. This seems to be the crux of the issue here. Not only can Gojo sew, he can also make clothes. So he's, I guess in a sense, a sort of tailor. Man, I think the stakes are getting pretty high for Gojo, being alone in a room with the popular girl, and she had just a second ago been undressing. So here we go, she seems to have sewn her own clothes. And I guess the idea is she wants advice from someone who actually knows what he's doing. So it's pretty clear that despite having made something, she hasn't done a particularly good job of creating the outfit from the picture. She seems to have struck a nerve with Gojo. He's finally, animated and critiquing her pretty harshly. It's nice to see him acting like a person for once. Man, only after harshly berating her does he realize, he's actually talking to another person. What a guy. So, it seems that this anime is populated exclusively by characters who seem to have some modicum of human understanding, She knows that he just sort of, slipped when he was talking, and she forgives him for it, I don't think a lot of other anime would do stuff like that. It's a nice change of pace. So here we have it. Her big goal is to cosplay a bunch of stuff she likes, and she needs the help of someone who knows what he's doing, in terms of sewing. So it seems like in that sense, they are a match made in heaven to be or rather to form a partnership. You know, I would almost think she wouldn't have to beg, like, just asking would suffice. He seems like, you know, the nice sort of guy who would just do it to be helpful. So another interesting dimension is that the character Marin wants to cosplay seems to have some sort of emotional significance to her. And presumably it's a fictional character within this fictional show, so I don't really have any outside information I can use here. I'm wondering what the significance is. See, there we go. Good man, Gojo. You know, he knows his skills don't line up perfectly, but he's willing to try and help. Yeah, so I think I see how things are going here. Marin achieves her dream of cosplaying, and Gojo gets to sort of live vicariously for someone who does what they want regardless of what other people think. Not a bad trade-off. And I'd imagine in Gojo's position he could gain some valuable skills in learning how to sew clothes. That title sounded like a doujin or something. Deary me. Maybe I've misjudged Marin's intentions. Alright, well that's it for this bonus episode. If you've enjoyed it, then by all means, tune in for the next one. See you, Space Cowboy.